What do we talk about when we talk about 1979's iconic outer space slasher, Alien? Personally, I start the list with the incredible slow burn tone and impressive special effects. Then, I usually gush for 20 or 30 minutes about how inspired the horror aspect is, and especially for its time. It creeps along with nothing but quiet, dark spaces to lure out your greatest fears as this mysterious man-eating creature stalks your every move. Truly scary stuff. And then, of course, I mention how Sigourney Weaver swiftly cemented her status as one of the greatest final girls in slasher cinema. All of that to say that this film truly lives up to the chills that they promise from the movie's tagline: in space, no one can hear you scream. Folks, slasher films are kind of a big deal here on the JoBlo Horror Originals channel. We love seeing Ghostface reveal their identities at the end of Scream, and we tune in for the horror of Haddonfield every single Halloween, and of course we sure as shit make sure to cover our fair share of cult slashers that fly below the mainstream radar. But lately, I've had a different kind of itch that I need to scratch. While I'm always in the mood for a little bit of blood and guts, I've been finding myself more in the mood for something a little more out there from the typical hulking monster slasher guy. Now, of course, within the horror genre alone, there are many different avenues that I could go down. See, on this show, I've covered ghosts, demons, cults, witches, haunted artifacts, monsters, serial killers, and even robots. But one thing that I don't feel I have properly covered is aliens.
You just covered the arachnid beasts in your Starship Troopers video. Newsflash, spaceman, those were aliens.
You again? Okay, yeah. Look, you're right. Those were aliens in Starship Troopers.
But imagine if you were a regular astronaut who wasn't properly expecting or properly trained or properly equipped to deal with an alien like this. What if you were in space with no way to get help and this thing had its sights fixed directly on you? Or as writer Dan O'Bannon would say, what if Jaws in space?
Let's not be too hasty. We don't know anything about it.
1979's Alien is the story of a group of astronauts who are headed home to Earth when a potential distress signal sends them to a nearby moon where they discover an alien life that is sure to make their journey home a hell of a lot bloodier. The film was famously directed by Ridley Scott and remains to be one of the greatest horror classics in all of cinema history. And honestly, I can't wait to get into it, so I'm Kier with JoBlo Horror Originals, and you're watching Deconstructing. Now, the setup for Alien is quite simple. We've got 7 astronauts: Ripley, played by Sigourney Weaver, Captain Dallas, played by Tom Skerritt, Lambert, played by Veronica Cartwright, Kane, played by John Hurt, Ash, played by Ian Holm, and Peter, played by Yaphet Kotto. Oh, and you can't forget Brett, played by Harry Dean Stanton.
Oh, what?
This crew is on the way back to Earth when they get a transmission from a nearby moon. On this moon is the remnants of an alien ship, where the crew finds a chamber full of eggs, and what's inside of those eggs makes its way onto their ship, via Kane's face. This sets up the rest of the film, which sees a rapidly growing alien creature with slimy skin and chrome teeth roaming about the ship and taking out the passengers one by one. A classic plot for a classic movie indeed, but there's more to it than that, so as usual, we're going to be breaking down this movie by way of our 4 key categories. First, we'll talk about the origin of the movie and how it went from just an egg to a still active mega franchise. Then we'll talk about the movie's legacy, which will allow us to dive into what makes it so mega franchisable. After that, we'll play a quick game of JoBlo horror movie trivia to get our movie minds buzzing before we get on to the finale. The X Factor, where I discuss that one small thing that takes Alien from being a space station slasher to being the timeless horror masterpiece that it rightfully is. So, if you're ready, then keep your backs to the wall and don't forget to drop a like on this video, and let's hit play on Alien. Have y'all ever seen the movie Dark Star by John Carpenter? You know, the one where a spray-painted beach ball is haunting a spaceship? Well, as it turns out, Dan O'Bannon worked on that film with Carpenter, and his experience on the film got him thinking, what if there was a fully horror version of this that played it completely straight? And so began the process of writing a script that would feature a handful of victims, an endless hellscape of space, and one very angry alien. O'Bannon knew that the key to making it scary was having a believable looking monster for his antagonist. More on that soon, but with the idea fresh in his mind, O'Bannon wrote the first act of a script called Memory, which actually turned out to be used as the film's iconic opening scene, which features our astronauts waking up to a distress transmission and deciding to investigate a broken down ship. After this, O'Bannon was stuck with a serious case of writer's block after the incredible beginning of the script. So, while working on other projects and leaving Memory on the back burner, O'Bannon discovered the haunting artwork of H.R. Giger. Giger is known for his incredibly disturbing and unflattering imagery that was a hot commodity for authors to use as book covers in the sci-fi genre. Around this time, O'Bannon moved to LA to live with Ronald Shusett, the film's uncredited co-writer, and the two wrote the rest of the script about one of H.R. Giger's horror creations stalking and killing the astronauts. Giger would of course go on to create the now iconic Xenomorph for the film.
Seems to have life. Organic life.
With a dark and bloody script in hand, Shusett and O'Bannon began shopping their movie around Hollywood, hoping to get enough capital to make a convincing Giger monster. Along comes Brandywine Entertainment, which consisted of producers Gordon Carroll, David Giler, and Walter Hill. They agreed to make the movie, but throughout the process, they would make the development of the final screenplay a living hell by demanding absurd rewrites, rearranging material, and ultimately putting their own stamp on an otherwise great script. It is believed by many, including O'Bannon, that the studio heads in Brandywine were trying to edge their work in just enough to take credit and leave the writers with nothing. And with O'Bannon being the sole credit writer on this movie, I guess we know who won that battle.
Well, you get what you contracted for like everybody else.
When it came down to it, the then recent release of a little film called Star Wars got studios in Hollywood bursting at the seams to start releasing original sci-fi blockbusters of their own. This caused Brandywine and O'Bannon and Shusett to begin their search for a proper director. After going through the list of potential talent to helm the movie, names like Robert Altman, Jack Clayton, Robert Aldrich, and Peter Yates all proved to be too slick, and the studio and writers feared that hiring them would run the risk of making the film seem less serious. They wanted somebody who would approach this thing as a straight-up horror movie. And luckily, when Brandywine saw the film The Duelist, they knew just who to seek out. Brandywine pursued Ridley Scott to direct the film, and Scott loved the script so much that he signed on immediately and even contributed some insanely detailed and gorgeous storyboards to the project. These things are incredibly detailed, and it really helped build the grand scale of this film from the very beginning. In fact, they were so good that upon seeing them, Brandywine decided to double the budget from an original $4.2 to a then $8.5 million. Which of course later turned into something more like $11.5 million, but if you ask me, it's money well spent.
And what about the money? If you want to give me some money to do, I'd be happy to, watch.
The casting process was fairly simple due to the script's writing being intentionally vague in its description of the astronauts. The intent was for the director to feel free to interpret each character in their own way, even as far as gender and physical attributes, and then cast accordingly. This gave Ridley the freedom to find the most powerful actors for each role, and that's how we got Sigourney Weaver as Ripley. Right on. With the main players in the mix, cameras were finally ready to roll in Shepperton Studios in London in 1978. Now, it's no secret that the Alien franchise has seen quite a robust history. The film was released in May of 1979 and was met with astonishing box office numbers. The film was such a hit that people were seeing it twice and bringing more and more friends with them each time. Alien's final box office run totaled at over $180 million, which in Hollywood terms means...
No, Aliens is a classic, okay? Get away from her, you bitch!
In 1986, James Cameron took on a direct sequel titled Aliens, which would also see the return of Ripley. As if two iconic directors weren't enough for this franchise, none other than David Fincher stepped up to direct Alien 3 in 1992, which also saw Ripley come back and, spoiler alert, die, only to be brought back again in Alien Resurrection in 97 as a clone. These direct sequels did do well, but the time between each film and the return on investment eventually led to the franchise fizzling out in theaters. But it did gain a lot of traction in the comic book and collectible space. This of course led to the beloved Alien vs. Predator comic book, which later revived the silver screen slasher with AVP in 2004 and AVP Requiem in 2007. Now, you might be thinking that like 6 films and a whole slew of multimedia opportunities is probably enough for this franchise. I mean, surely there would be no need to... That's right, folks. Alien tried its hand at the prequel thing with Prometheus, and later went on to bring us Alien Covenant and the highly anticipated Fede Alvarez-directed Alien Romulus, which hopefully looks to bring the franchise back to being more grounded. No pun intended. But what makes the movie worth the trip to the theaters every time for follow-up films? Why did the original Alien spawn such a huge success? Well, because it was made the right way.
What else?
On its own and away from the franchise, Alien delivered us stunning cinematography that invites you directly into the ship with the crew. I mean, the Blu-ray of this thing is beautiful, folks, trust me. But what about the chilling slow burn tone and pacing? The movie lets you kind of float around the ship in suspense with the cast for a lot of this film. And personally, I find it delightful either way, but what really makes it special is that even in these slow moments, you're treated to a warm and grounded group dynamic between the characters that makes the dialogue scenes that much more gripping. It's truly a movie you can just sit and vibe with, and I think that says a lot.
This thing bled acid, who knows what it's gonna do when it's dead?
I think it's safe to assume it isn't a zombie.
The movie's legacy goes beyond a good movie and a pretty good franchise. Alien was such a shockwave of a film that the impact of it on the genre can still be felt in movies today. While Scott would call it the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in space, science fiction has benefited the most from this film's influence. Movies like Galaxy of Terror, Inseminoid, Forbidden World, and Dead Space. The reach even extends to recent films like Underwater and Life, which are essentially the same movie but with different monsters. And honestly, both of those movies are alright, so check them out.
Yes, well, it's adapted remarkably well to our atmosphere, considering its nutritional requirements.
And while it's easy to say that Alien inspired dozens of movies over the years, let's also not forget that part of this movie's charm is the familiar nature of the otherwise brand new concept. When talking about the film, Dan O'Bannon said, quote,
I didn't steal Alien from anybody. I stole it from everybody.
Alien was a mashup of ideas, notably taken from films like Forbidden Planet, Planet of Vampires, and multiple EC comics from the time. These old-time science fiction films give me a sense of nostalgia that Alien also touches on in the same way, and I think that must be true for many of us, seeing as the film is rightfully ranked up there with the best of them.
Whenever he says anything, you say right, Brett. You know that?
Right.
Did you know that originally there was a scene written for the end of the movie where the alien sees Ripley hiding in the closet while she's undressed and then becomes strangely aroused by that? This would cause the alien to note the difference in their bodies and add a disturbing nature to the end of the movie. Luckily, it was cut from the film and the ending stands out as it should. Not gross.
I got you. You son of a bitch.
And speaking of that creepy little Xenomorph, let's see if you can answer this question. Which famous painter inspired the iconic chest buster scene, which has gone on to be the film's most memorable sequence? Was it A. Thomas Kincaid, B. Francis Bacon, C. Ivan Plush, or D. Ferris Heiser? Comment your answers down below. I can't believe it's that time already, folks. We're at the X Factor, and this is where I'm supposed to pick one small and seemingly meaningless thing and crown it as the most important. And usually I'll struggle around looking for just one thing, and then I'll have this grand revelation right at the buzzer. And yeah, it's no different this time because originally the X Factor seemed obvious. The practical effects, right? The way that this terrifying creature was brought to life was both impressive for the time and honestly impressive for today as well. Today, you would never see a movie of this magnitude risk puppeteering their only villain and engineering it to move smoothly. And most of it was practical, but the digital effects that were used were still very good, and this thing really holds up. But we expect that, so I can't give it the X Factor. And for the same reason, I almost wanted to give Sigourney Weaver the X Factor, but it was too obvious. Although she really did do an amazing job and really owns this movie.
This is Ripley, last survivor of the Nostromo. Signing off.
But what it's really all about for me, and what really makes the movie a beacon for quality sci-fi seekers, is the film's final showdown. Now, yes, this may seem obvious as well, but what makes the final confrontation different from any of the other ones we've seen in the 7 films since? It's quiet. The movie's slow buildup does lead to a triumphant climax, but that's not the end. The movie truly ends with Ripley thinking she's finally ditched the Xenomorph after losing her entire crew. But then, she realizes that that thing is still on her ship, knocked out. Instead of blaring music, flashing lights, and a CGI purple energy beam, Ripley slowly and quietly sneaks into the closet, suits up, and blasts the ship's thrusters to expel the alien from the ship. But it's done in stealth. She doesn't scream, she doesn't fight, she doesn't blink, she barely even breathes. It's very satisfying. It feels like you quietly snuck up on that scary spider that's been crawling around your room at night, and it's definitely the reason that this movie sticks the landing. Folks, we did it. We talked about Alien, and I can now add the Xenomorph to my ever-expanding list of creepy horror creatures that have been deconstructed on the show, and I'm very happy about that. But as always, I want to hear from you guys, so make sure you comment down below what other movies and creatures you'd love to see deconstructed here on the channel, and of course make sure you like and subscribe for the very best in horror movie content. I better get out of here. I'm getting sleepy. Bye everybody.
Let's get the hell out of here.
Debating sequels versus their predecessors is something all movie lovers have voluntarily gone through. To this day, there are great battles being waged over which flick is better. Is Empire better than A New Hope? Is Godfather 2 superior to the original? Did James Cameron top his classic Terminator with the revolutionary T2 Judgment Day? These are the important conversations that we geeks have with each other, and sometimes even with ourselves. Of course, there's never a need to choose one over the other. If you're feeling charitable, you can call it a draw between two great flicks. Still, it's a fun debate to have, although careful not to get too heated on the matter. James Cameron never intended to ruin friendships with his works of science fiction brilliance. But he did intend to create the ultimate sequel when he followed up the 1979 horror hit Alien with a bigger, badder epic that took the intimate haunted house setting of Ridley Scott's film and exchanged it for a battlefield. "This time it's war," said the tagline, and they weren't messing around. While an excellent round two after the knockout punch Ridley delivered, and following the film's terrific protagonist into a new circle of hell, Aliens is its own beast, different enough to build on the legacy of the original while hitting some of the same crucial notes. Is it better than Alien?
What?
That's a fun debate to have, but one for another day. What isn't up for debate is that Aliens is one of the best sequels released in the 80s. And hell, it may just be the best horror sequel of all time. I should be clear about one thing. I've seen Aliens more times than maybe any other movie ever made. I owned a VHS copy of it back in the day, and I'll be damned if I didn't wear that thing out after a few short years. Plenty of movies went through the same ringer. Halloween, Star Wars, RoboCop, but none so much as Aliens. There was something just so explosive about it. A shocking combination of action, science fiction, horror, and even drama that takes your stomach, bundles it up in knots, and doesn't let go until the end credits roll. It's a powerful experience even if you've seen it 100 times, and it helps shape an entire generation of movie geeks. Think about your best buds from back in the day, and tell me that they weren't just as enamored with Cameron's film as you. While there were so many movies that helped shape our tastes and love for the genre, Aliens had a particularly intense impact on our minds. Part of the appeal is that there was just nothing else like it at the time. Perhaps 1987's Predator could be seen as a close relative, but Aliens transports us into a frightening and lonely world where one never feels safe or comfortable. It's like a haunted house ride that lasts well over 2 hours, and by the end of it, your nerves have been thoroughly shredded, and you're quite grateful for the experience. Truth be told, when I was a young one, the original Alien was almost too grim of an experience to handle. It's so dark, so hopeless, so creepy. It might have been the scariest horror movie I'd ever seen at the time. I vaguely recall Aliens coming out and doing gangbusters, but I was honestly a little intimidated by it. If the first movie was scary with just one alien, how could I handle the sequel, which features a platoon of the vicious buggers? Eventually, I prepared myself for battle and watched the VHS of the movie. Safe to say, I haven't been the same since. What sticks out about those early viewings of the movie is that it messed with my emotions so effortlessly that my adolescent mind was actually impressed. I don't think I'd seen a movie that was somber 1 minute, then funny, then suspenseful, then horrifying, and back again for another round. You get the point. This wasn't just a thriller where things popped into frame every few minutes to give you a cheap thrill, but something closer to a nightmare, where a chance to breathe a sigh of relief was very hard to come by. At the risk of sounding pretentious in terms of a movie-going experience, it was pure cinema, a work of art that beats the hell out of you. My younger self appreciated that, and I sure as hell do to this day. Of course, a handful of years later, the director's cut of the film would appear on Laserdisc. Talk about revelations. They don't get any bigger than that. Taking an already punishing movie of 2 hours and 17 minutes and adding 15 minutes to that, expanding upon Ripley's story while introducing brand new elements, such as showing us the colonists on LV-426, was a gift from the gods for us Aliens fans. That's the definitive cut of the movie, no doubt, but our discussion here can be applied to either version. They're both classics as far as we're concerned. Naturally, I never knew who the mad genius behind this masterpiece was. The Terminator was a seminal movie for me as well. Another incredible film that cleverly combined action, science fiction, horror, and drama. That film's director, James Cameron, quickly became a name to watch for cinephiles, and his much anticipated follow-up would be carefully examined. As we very well know by now, Mr. Cameron never half-asses it. When he yells action, he means it. And it turned out that making a sequel to an instant classic like Alien was not going to be taken lightly. It would be a true sequel in the sense that it jumps off the ingredients the first film gave us, in this case, the setting, the villain, and most importantly, a hero who takes no shit from anyone, human or alien. Setting this movie 57 years after the original, Cameron's able to open the world up, add more characters, and ramp up the action while still maintaining the original's atmosphere of dread. Another debate that we can have is whether or not Aliens is an action movie, a science fiction movie, or a horror movie. Well, in fact, it's really no debate at all, because it's absolutely all of those things in one grisly package. There's no doubt that there is more action, in the traditional sense of the word, in this one as opposed to Alien, which was definitely more of a horror movie through and through. But for my money, Aliens also absolutely belongs in the horror section of the library, because underneath all that gunfire is a terrifying tale about a group of people being eliminated one by loathsome creatures who either kill or impregnate them. Monsters burst out of chests, facehuggers pop out of nowhere, and acid blood is sprayed freely, melting the human flesh that it lands on. Yes sirree, this is a horror movie. It just happens to have a fair share of explosions as well. And action horror movies aren't exactly easy to pull off, because the two genres are often at war with each other. Let's talk about Ripley. While Alien made Sigourney Weaver a star, Aliens is the movie that confirmed Ellen Ripley was a character for the ages. In the first Alien, Ripley is a smart, proactive member of the crew who is often the stick in the mud, the voice of reason who rubs everyone the wrong way. She's the one who gets things right at any cost, which makes it no surprise that she's the sole survivor of that doomed mission. The Ripley we reunite with in Aliens is ultimately an immediate icon. When we meet her, she's dealing with PTSD, mourning the loss of her daughter, struggling to make ends meet, a sad, lonely life without much purpose on the face of things. Naturally, when asked to help with a rescue mission, and possibly confront her toothy nemesis once again, she's not exactly in a rush to do so. But in order to conquer the demons in her mind, she's got to do it. And we believe it, even if it's a plot convenience for her to agree to go back. As Ripley, Weaver runs the gamut of emotions, from remorseful to angry to compassionate, and everything in between. Ripley never seems like less than a real person for even a second, and she's got our sympathy every step of the way. Sigourney Weaver received an Oscar nomination for this performance, and for the Academy to recognize a horror film in an acting category tells you everything that you need to know about Weaver's excellent work. Ripley is still the kick-ass movie heroine that all others are measured against. But don't get me wrong, the rest of the cast is absolutely vital to the film's success, especially since it's such a sizable ensemble. It would be easy for Cameron to make the soldiers dispensable, one-note nobodies, but he gives us a handful of intriguing characters who are more than they initially seem. Michael Baine's Hicks at first fades into the background early on, not making as much of an impression as other more showy personalities that take center stage. But after the shit hits the fan, we see that Hicks is a natural-born leader who's able to maintain his cool under immense pressure, and Bain gives a realistic portrayal of a grunt who reluctantly rises to the challenge. An unforgivable character comes in the form of Private Vasquez, and let's be honest, a lot of us had never seen a lady like this before. Perhaps the most physically intimidating character in the film, her introduction is an eye-opener, easily doing pull-ups that would make most dudes tremble. While she's not exactly a multi-layered person, Vasquez has our attention throughout, thanks to her stone-faced heroics and determination to save what's left of her squad. Leave it to Cameron to not be satisfied with just one imposing female in his arsenal. And do I really have to give a shout out to Bill Paxton? Don't we all know how amazing he is in this and any movie? Yes, I do, and yes, we do. Interestingly enough, Paxton's Hudson might be the most memorable human character after Ripley in the movie. Starting off as an impossibly brash loudmouth who talks a big game, he's almost immediately revealed to be a childish wimp when the going gets tough. And to be fair, you can't really blame the guy after some of the stuff that he sees go down.
This isn't happening.
But the movie lets Hudson regain his composure as it moves along. Cameron isn't content to just let him be an annoyance who deserves to die ASAP. The tragedy, of course, is that just when Hudson gets his balls back, he's done in by the aliens, who don't really give a crap about character arcs. Still, Paxton is absolutely perfect casting for the role, and it's an understatement to say he's still missed to this day. Other faces emerge distinctly. Carrie Henn as Newt, the little girl who braves it all. Henn's performance isn't necessarily an all-timer, but give the kid credit. She's dealing with a hell of a lot in front of and behind the camera. That we care about Newt just as much as Ripley does is all that matters, and no doubt Henn makes that happen for us. Lance Henriksen also cuts a very memorable figure as the android Bishop.
Thank you.
About whom we're slightly nervous considering the events of the first film and its sinister artificial human. Henriksen displays just enough emotion to gradually get us on Bishop's side, and his heroics at the end of the film give us a reason to truly appreciate the misunderstood fellow. It still just might be Henriksen's definitive role. And then there's Paul Reiser as Carter Burke. Burke belongs to that very special class of horror movie villain. He's not the big bad, but he's a detriment to our heroes and a sniveling, underhanded weasel to boot. We're talking slime balls like Frederick Chilton in Silence of the Lambs, Dr. Cruz in Friday the 13th Part 7, Rhodes in Day of the Dead. These guys are monsters in human form, and we simply cannot wait for them to get their just desserts. Burke is at the top of this particular class. Not only is he responsible for unleashing the alien on the colony, killing dozens of families in the process, he learns no lesson from his deed and keeps on shilling for the soulless company that he works for. Sounds very 2023. Even being a witness to a mass slaughter doesn't change the bottom line for Burke, as he's willing to sacrifice every last one of his human companions just so he can suck up to his corporate overlords. Best known for his comedic chops, Paul Reiser crushes it as a spineless tool without a shred of human empathy. Burke is an asshole for the ages. When he meets his fate, the universe cheers. For me, the most enthralling part of the entire adventure, and it's certainly etched into all of our minds forever by now. Ripley racing to save Newt, meeting the fearsome queen, the close call escape while James Horner's Bishop's Countdown epically blares over the soundtrack, and then, of course, the showdown for the ages. Bad Mama against Bad Mama in a battle for who's really the queen of the galaxy. Of course, we know who the crown belongs to, although it's too close for comfort at the very end. And as an aside, the alien queen remains one of the most awesome practical effects in movie history. It's a real shame to think that they barely make them like that anymore. Thank the gods that we still have this one, gone hurtling through space to her doom, but not close to being forgotten. There are only a handful of movies that stick with you in the same way they did when you were first warming up to them. Those are the movies that work on us on all levels. Emotionally, intellectually, viscerally. Aliens is one of those films. From the simple but crafty screenplay, to the superb cast, to every person on the tech side working at the absolute peak of their capabilities. With The Terminator and then Aliens, James Cameron announced to the world that he was no ordinary director, but a man on a mission to blow us away each time we went into one of his movies. He has, as of this writing, not stopped doing that. His legacy is already very much in place. What's his best movie? Well, that's another one of those debates that we could have. And what a challenging one that is, because there are several candidates, but I know the one that truly changed things for me, that will forever be one of the defining movie experiences of my life. That's Aliens, one of the best 80s horror memories a guy could ask for.
Alien Isolation is the best Alien game we've ever had, and unlike our previous entries, is a damn scary game. They got very good reviews, and even some DLC that lovingly plays tribute to its source material. Well, we kind of went over this when discussing Alien vs. Predator for the Jaguar, but Alien is a 1979 horror classic directed by Ridley Scott. It has become one of the most revered sci-fi horror films of all time, and is even interpreted as being a slasher film in space, subbing in the Xenomorph for the many masked killers that the following decades would throw our way. Its sequel, Aliens, is known as one of the finest action sci-fi films of all time, with a slew of memorable characters, great score, action, and special effects. Unfortunately, that is where the accolades for the film series stop. Alien 3 is an enjoyable mess. Alien Resurrection tried to blend Alien and Aliens, but lost both the horror and the action along the way. And the prequel series of Prometheus and Covenant have about as many defenders as critics, while neither of the AVP movies blew critics or fans away. The series goes far beyond celluloid, however, with novels, comic books, toys, and of course, video games. We already went over some of the AVP games. In fact, there are just about as many AVP games as there are games just following the Xenomorph alone. It starts with Alien on the Atari in 1982. In it, you play as one of the crew members collecting alien eggs while avoiding full-grown aliens, with the controls being it's Pac-Man. Just 100% reskinned Pac-Man, which is a pretty popular thing to do at the time. Following Alien in 1982, we have, well, Alien in 1984 on the Commodore 64 and ZX Spectrum. Although it had only been 2 years, this is night and day compared to Pac-Alien. The game starts with a layout of the Nostromo from the film and shows off all the playable characters. Each game, a random character will birth the alien, as well as one of the crew members being labeled as the android. The alien will quickly grow to its final size and wander the ship hunting the playable characters, and if the android character is not discovered and dealt with, they will help the alien take out the rest of the human crew. Winning the game either happens when the ship is blown up, like in the film, or you manage to kill the alien with one of the controlled characters. With random characters being selected for the android and alien host respectively with each playthrough, and the ability to win or end the game with different outcomes or strategies, this game was leaps and bounds ahead of its predecessor and added a completely new definition of game replayability. And that's pretty much it, at least when it comes to games on the original movie. As the sequels started to come out, so too did the video games of those sequels, as it was a smart business decision when looking to capitalize on a hot license. We got a first-person strategy game and a side-scrolling action game to represent the second film in 1987, an all-time classic arcade game in 1990, also following the story of Aliens, followed by 5 different Alien 3 games released on 5 different formats in 1993. While the games on the Master System, NES, SNES, Game Boy, and arcade all follow the film to a degree, they all do it differently based on console limitations. The SNES iteration is my personal favorite, with its varied mission types and memories of playing it often early on Saturday mornings as a kid. After the lack of success from Alien 3, the film franchise, as well as the video game adaptations, would slow down. We would get Alien Trilogy on a few systems in 1996, and Alien Resurrection based on the movie in 2000. After that, we'd get an arcade shooter, an online MMO, a couple mobile games, and a questionable Game Boy Color game that I had no idea existed until researching this video. In 2011, we got a shockingly cool Nintendo DS game in Alien Infestation, and the absolute nadir of Alien games with the disappointment that is Aliens Colonial Marines in 2013. I could have skipped all these, but none of them will get their own video, and all of them deserve anywhere from a cursory look on YouTube to a casual playthrough. And then finally, 30 years after 1984's microcomputer excursion, Creative Assembly released Alien Isolation in October of 2014. The studio was almost exclusively known for the Total War franchise on the PC, but was inspired by the worlds of both BioShock and Dishonored, and decided to pitch the idea for a first-person survival horror project set in the Alien universe to Saga, who owned the license at the time. Instead of just a retread of the first movie in some form, however, they decided to create a direct sequel that follows Ellen Ripley's daughter. 20th Century Fox went all in on the cooperation and lent them props and behind-the-scenes footage for research and development to make the game feel as lived-in as possible. Spoiler alert if you haven't played the game yet, I highly recommend it. Set 15 years after the original film, Amanda Ripley, Ellen's daughter, is approached by an employee of the Weyland-Yutani Corporation with information about her mother. The black box recorder of the Nostromo has been recovered and is being held at the Sevastopol, a giant space station. Traveling with Samuels and Taylor, they are separated, and Ripley must enter the station alone. The station is almost completely abandoned and disheveled. After some searching, she finds an inhabitant named Axel, who explains the monster destroyed the space station and its people. Ripley doesn't believe him until she witnesses the monster kill and take him away. After finding the flight recorder, Ripley discovers its data has been corrupted and searches for a way to unscramble it, as well as reunite with her companions that came with her. Eventually finding them, she is told Taylor is injured and that requires a trip to the medical wing to find proper supplies. After nearly being killed by a Xenomorph herself, Ripley and her crew are discovered by the remaining colonial marshals aboard the Sevastopol and find out how the Xenomorph made its way on the station to begin with. They hatch a plan to lure the alien into part of the ship that can be sealed and jettisoned, sending Ripley with a flamethrower as bait. When she gets there, however, she is betrayed and barely escapes with her life, successfully killing the Xenomorph threat. While the situation appears to be resolved, it quickly goes downhill as the stationed android units, known as Working Joes, begin to kill the remaining humans. We find out that the station's computer, Apollo, has been ordered by its parent company, Weyland-Yutani, to protect the Xenomorph at all costs, and now sees the humans as threats. Samuels is killed in the scuffle, but enables Ripley to escape the situation. When she confronts Apollo about the mass murder, since the Xenomorph has been eliminated, Apollo sends her to the core of the station, where Ripley finds multiple eggs, facehuggers, and full-grown Xenomorphs have infested the heart of Sevastopol. Ripley purges the nest, but not before a handful of Xenomorphs are able to escape further into the station. One of the last remaining marshals tells Ripley that Taylor, seemingly only a lawyer along for the ride, is actually a double agent of the company sent to recover a live specimen. Tracking the now kidnapped Taylor to Marlowe's ship, the captain who brought the Xenomorph threat to the station to begin with, Ripley finds that Marlowe plans to destroy his ship in order to take out the Sevastopol and prevent the Xenos from ever reaching humanity at large. Before this happens, though, Taylor takes control and attempts to help Ripley stop the ship's destruction. They do, but both Marlowe and Taylor are killed in the process, leaving Ripley alone again. Making it back to the Sevastopol, Ripley and the remaining Marshal Ricardo attempt to call for evacuation to the Torrens, the ship that she came to the Sevastopol originally on, as the station plummets into the atmosphere of a nearby planet. Ricardo is killed, and Ripley is taken to yet another nest before eventually escaping and making it to the Torrens through the airlock, as the Sevastopol completely falls apart. Once there, Ripley is attacked by the final Xenomorph, who made it on board with her. Backed into an airlock, Ripley ejects them both before the alien can kill her, and the game ends with Ripley floating in space as the light from a ship shines on her face. Alien Isolation is a first-person horror experience. Calling it a first-person shooter does it a disservice, as while it does contain weapons, a flamethrower, a pistol, a shotgun, various melee and throwables, weapon play is usually a last resort. You control Amanda Ripley the entire game as she explores the massive Sevastopol space station. She is human and not a trained fighter, so many of the situations are better suited for ranged traps, running, or hiding. The enemies in the game include scared humans or soldiers who will attack on sight to try to gain your resources, Working Joe androids, a few facehuggers, and the titular alien. The facehuggers and humans can be destroyed by normal means, but the Working Joes require a lot more work. They can be hit a few times with your utility hammer, but will guard against it eventually. They can be burned or shot with regular ammo, but it's incredibly scarce and you won't usually have enough to deal with the group. With these guys, the answer is usually to work around and avoid them completely. Then there's the alien. The alien can't be killed, you can't outrun it, and hiding will only delay the inevitable. Fire can scare it away temporarily, or you can use other humans to distract it and kill two birds with one stone, though it mostly ignores the Joes. Most everything else just annoys it. It will look for you when you make noise or if it catches a glimpse of you, and is easily one of the smartest AI components we've ever seen in a video game. The encounters with the alien turn the game into survival horror of the highest order. Another cool component that Isolation brings to its gameplay is the ability to craft. Crafting requires two main ingredients, the blueprints on how to build the desired item, and the raw materials that it requires. The items you can craft are pipe bombs, smoke bombs, EMPs, flashbangs, Molotov cocktails, noisemakers, and the ever-important medkit. As scary as the game is, as much as you want to get the hell away from the alien as quickly as possible, exploring is the only way to get all the crafting material or blueprints you need. With that exploration comes another element to Isolation, world building. The Sevastopol looks similar to the downtrodden remains of Bioshock's Rapture. You get much more story than just from speaking with NPCs. Finding logs and reports, seeing bloody writing on the wall, hearing screams, finding makeshift morgues all tell the story of the station's downfall. Making it all the way through is a tense but rewarding experience that every horror fan should put themselves through. Along with the production value and feel, fright is where this game excels. Even before you get a chance to see the Xenomorph, the foreboding atmosphere puts you on the kind of edge that will keep your body tense through most every encounter. It is scary in the dark, it is scary in the light, it is scary armed, it is scary unarmed. The humans that you can fight or avoid are the least scary things that you run into through the course of the game. The android Working Joes have an unsettling look and feel about them even before they go homicidal on you, and fighting them gives you a similar feel that watching the crew of the Nostromo dealt with Ash does in the first film. They are even attempting to sound helpful and calm as they kill you. But we are here for the alien. The game is called Alien Isolation for a reason. This thing is scary. It is an instant death if it catches you, it is unkillable outside of scripted scenes, and it learns from you. Even before you meet the Xenomorph the first time, there is this frightening aura built around what is in the dark, and then after the first encounter, all bets are off. Nothing is truly safe again. Even saving the game is a delicate balance, because if the alien catches you before the save is complete, it does not count. Alien Isolation is not only the best Alien game, it's also currently the last Alien game. Well, until the recently announced Alien Fireteam comes out, but that looks to go all in on the action-oriented sequel rather than the horror of the original. After Isolation, Creative Assembly went back to the Total War strategy series, even releasing a game on PCs this year. The game received mostly good reviews and continues to get ported to newer systems, with a Switch version releasing as recently as December 2019. Already 7 years old, Isolation seems to be aging like fine wine, with many players discovering it for the first time recently and giving it high marks. It doesn't suffer for replay value as it contains a decent amount of DLC, including the exceptional Crew Expendable section, which brought back nearly all the original actors to reprise their roles of the first film, as well as a bunch of challenge maps to keep honing your skills against this unstoppable killing machine. I can't speak highly enough about Isolation, and purposefully left out a lot of details as I really want to encourage everyone to play it, either for the first time or maybe on a new console. What did you think of Alien Isolation? What's your favorite Alien game? Let us know in the comments.